Okay, this is a continuation of the previous video where we successfully split up 13, 14, and 16. Now what I'm going to do is clean up some of these rough edits that I made, and I'll illustrate some of the techniques that I use for doing that. They're pretty, retentive, but I think the results are worth it. The maps look nice when they're printed. So I zoom in pretty close on this so you can see the whole street. As you can see, this line snapped nicely to the assessment parcels. I'll go into edit mode with a Control E. Yeah, so it's snapped nicely there. The line should really be in the center of the street, and it shouldn't be like at an angle to the one that it's coming from. So there's no way to make it automatically line up, so I'll just do a best guess on it. And then I try to center the crosshairs in the middle of the street. So I think that'll be good. I'm on a VPN connection, so it's kind of slow to update. But now you can see it's at this point it's pretty much halfway across. And as we get further along, it starts creeping towards this side of the street, and that's because the point at the other end is going to be not centered. You can see it gets worse and worse. And here we'll do the same sort of an edit. We'll just grab this point, try to make it extend out from the nicely aligned assessment parcel point, and I'll center it, make sure it's roughly parallel, and then let go. And now it'll look pretty nice. So after I've done that, I'll zoom out a little bit, just make sure that I followed those lines nicely. And at this point, I'll just basically continue to walk the line until I get back to the origin. In this case, it's pretty obvious what you do. Try to center it in the street, at the same time keeping the extension from this lot line pretty straight. That's not too bad. I'll then continue. This is a case where we have a large right-of-way. I'm not sure what street this is. Oh, it's in between Raleigh and Gateway. So here we're working along the old railroad tracks. So we'll zoom back in again. And I'll just drop this point. It's pretty well centered on this right away. So I'll just make sure that it's centered nicely on the street here. One of the keys I strive for is to use as few points along a line as possible. It makes editing a lot easier. So in this case, you'll see that there are no points in between here and here. Sometimes if there's points at some places along, I'll delete them and just use one straight end-to-end line. There's other cases where you have different widths of streets, or you have some angle curves like this one where you need to have those points in order to maintain a nice symmetry on your street. So we then follow along. I'm pretty sure these ones were already here, those points, before we started these edits. So I'll zoom out a little bit. Oh no, this is the one where I carved out that property, that empty lot, so I could join up with this. So what I'm going to do is zoom back in. Oops. I'll zoom back in here tight. Yeah, it looks pretty good actually, so I'll just follow the lot line. I know that's snapped nicely. I'm not really sure why there's so many points here. So what I'll do is I'll just turn off the voting subdivision quickly. And whatever, it seems to have lined up nicely. I'm not going to worry about that. And here I pop back out into the center of Springfield, and I just did that very roughly, but it wasn't actually too bad. That said, when you zoom in closer, you can see there is some room for improvement. I'll just make that come out at right angles to the street edge and go about halfway across. So that's pretty good. A good indicator is if you split the street names. If you can do that, that means you're pretty accurate. And this just keeps on going. So I don't think I changed. Yeah, I didn't change this part. So that's it for this particular boundaries points. Now we'll just go and do the same sort of thing down here. on NK14. So if I turn on edit, you can see where the points are. There's a nice straight lines like I like to see. I'm just going to make sure that these points along here are all centered and that the curves look pretty nice. And then we're done. So usually these boundaries were pre-existing and it didn't look so good, so I'm just going to adjust it a little bit. This might have been from a previous election. I think I missed it. Sometimes when I try to adjust, I end up making it worse, but in this case I'm just going to kind of start over. You'll notice I pull it off to the side so I can get this thing centered nicely again. If you try to make very slight changes, a lot of times GMedia won't let you. It'll snap back to your original point and you can't really change things. In this case that worked out pretty well. Notice in this case we're falling off a bit, and here's an example of a point that really doesn't need to be there. All it does is, kind of screw up the line. So what I'll do is I'll click on it until it turns purple, hit the delete key, say yes to the prompt, and that one will snap away. This intersection right here might need to be adjusted a little bit. Yeah, it's a little bit too far south. So I'll bring it back up. That looks better. And then we'll keep in here. Here's where the street opens up a little bit, but it is maintaining a constant distance from this street edge. And then here it actually comes back into play and is pretty much even. Well, except here, I guess the next point is going to be a bit low. So we'll just grab it. It's centered pretty nicely this way, so I'll keep the mouse on that line. And that should do it. So now that street is pretty nice. I'll zoom out a little bit and try to get back where we were. Okay. Back up the street, Red Oak Drive, and here's where I started monkeying around. So this looks pretty good. What I'll do is I'll zoom in on this intersection. Intersections are always important because you want to start square in the middle, so I just try to approximate halfway between these 2 points and these 2 points. I think you can buy tools that'll do this for you or help you do it, but we don't have any. So I have to eyeball it. So now we're starting this curved street up here. So what I try and do is just put a bunch of intermediate points along the curve at regular intervals so it looks like a nice, almost graceful curve. But to do that, I'll just pull this out of the way for now. And again, that's so I don't have to run into problems trying to place a point close to the line, which GMedia doesn't like you to do. So I'm just going to start off by dragging a new point right into the center of this intersection, and then I'll just kind of keep going along, maintaining a bit of an arc as I do it. Draw my end line, which will be sort of in the center of this intersection. And then when I'm done with sort of my intervening points, I'll drag this one that I had moved out of the way, bring it back in, and now you've got a pretty reasonably curved line. I don't like one of them though, so I'll just touch that up. Drag it out of the way, and then I'll drag it back in. Okay, whatever, that's good enough. And now for this back lane, again, there's really no need to have these sorts of points here. What I will do though is I'll often put one at the start of one of these lanes Just get it centered nice so I know it's starting off right. I could just use this point. Actually, I think that's what I'll do. So I'll delete this point. I'll start off with this one, make sure it's nicely centered in the back lane. That's a case where GMedia just pulled it back, but whatever, that's fine. Here we have a case where it's going along straight, then it starts doing a curve. So where the curve starts, you throw a kind of a start of curve point there. That's right about there. This is a real gentle curve, so I'm just going to put in a few points. And again, here's cases where, you know, if you were to try and move that point just a couple pixels, GMedia is going to just put it back where it came from. So I'll just drag a point away, draw the intervening points. Will the street never end? Finally. This one's kind of bad, so again I'll just move it right out of the way. This time I'll actually do it. And right center in the intersection. Oh great, another curvy street. Okay, well whatever. this point. And I think that looks pretty good. Just make sure this is centered nicely. Yeah, it looks like it is. So I'll select this floating subdivision. And I think that's pretty good. We've edited all of these. We've just completed this set of edits. So we should be good to go. I'll just turn off the assessment parcel and the street names. Looks good. You can see that in cases where you use back lanes, the street outline doesn't help, like here. Obviously when you cross parcels and go along the backs of parcels, same thing, the street outline doesn't help you. So a lot of times I'll just have it turned off and only turn it on as a reference. So let's try creating our voting boundary. So 13, 14, 15. Click on the create voting boundary. And we've got a problem. There's some sort of a overlapping line here between 16 and 13. You can really see it if I turn off the voting subdivisions. This has no business, that line has no business being there, and that'll cause all sorts of issues with Oracle trying to do spatial queries. It gets all confused. So the way I resolve this typically is I'll turn back on my voting subdivisions. I'll delete either this NK16 or NK13. In this case I'll just do NK13. Oops. So pick NK13, I'll delete it, Control D. Boom, it's gone. Then I'll delete the voting boundary. So now basically I've got NK16, I got NK14, but I got nothing here. So the easiest way to recreate it, and it's, you don't want to go redrawing it, especially if there's curves, is you can use a feature called the interactive insert. So what you have to do this is you basically select everything around what you want to create a new feature for. In this case I'll start at NK16 and work my way clockwise. I'll control click everything, including these ones on the opposite sides of corners. I'll select this one and this one, and MK14, EK24, this one, this one, this one, and the one up here. So now I've selected everything around NK, what will be NK 13. So I go to the insert menu, interactive area by face. A little drop down list shows up here. I'll select what I want to create. It's a polling subdivision. I can then click in this empty area. It'll then ask me what do you want to call it. So I'll call it NK13. Say OK. It'll recreate it based on what's inside of the selections you just made. I'll then hit escape to get out of that special mode. And I'll try creating that voting boundary again. So I'll select 13, 14, 16. Click on the create voting boundary button, and voila, we'll see that there are no, let me just show all of them. 13, 14, 16. We'll see that there are no, turn off the voting subdivisions again. There's no funny, oh my goodness, there is a funny line here in NK14. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'll blow away NK14, recreate it, do the same exercise. So I'll just blow away the voting subdivision right now, or that's actually the voting boundary. I'll turn back on voting boundaries. I'll delete NK14, Control D on it, and then just like before, I'll select all the a selection of features that surrounds it. In this case, I just need 3 selections to surround it. Again, insert interactive area by face. I hate having to pick this every single time. Pick polling sub. Click on the new one. Name it NK14. Okie dokie. Hit escape to get out of that mode. And again, select their voting subdivisions, click on create voting boundary, and almost certainly this time we'll have no problems. Looks good to me. Again, I'll just turn off the voting subdivisions so we can see that this is very clean. There's no issues there at all. Wasn't that easy? That was actually a pretty challenging one, especially with respect to the tidying up of the boundary points because of the curves. Typically they're quite a bit faster than that.